to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, a place where you can keep informed of the latest business and tech trends by listening to stories of other people in your field and how they are overcoming challenges with emerging technologies. Join me in learning from the guests actionable tips and lessons learned to obtain greater clarity on how you or your business can leverage technology. And today, it's a huge honour to invite Chase Cunningham back onto the podcast. He's got up to speak with me at 4 a.m. in Arizona, and I think that must make him the most professional podcast guest that we've had in 2,300 interviews. I've got to be honest, you wouldn't get much sense out of me at 4 a.m. in the morning, but Chase is an incredibly cool guy. His name is Dr. Chase Cunningham, and he's also the Chief Strategy Officer at Ericom Software, a leading provider of cloud-delivered zero-trust cybersecurity solutions that protect today's digitally distributed organisations from advanced security threats. And not only that, he's got an incredibly cool voice that reminds me of James Hetfield, and he's also known throughout the cybersecurity industry as Dr. Zero Trust. How cool is that? Straight out of a Hollywood movie. Love that. So I urge anyone listening to check out the other interviews that we've had together where he's talked about his inspiring backstory, operational experience, working in various capacities supporting NSA, US Navy, FBI, cyber and other government mission groups. Some real gold in our previous conversations there, and I'll try and include links in the show notes to those. But today we're going to be talking about everything from cybersecurity threats, vulnerability trends, to ChatGPT and weather balloons. Yes, we're going to cover it all in a short amount of time. So if Chase can get up at 4 a.m. to make this conversation happen, we better not keep him waiting. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Arizona, where Chase is waiting to speak with us. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. For anyone that missed our previous conversations, can you just remind the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Chase Cunningham. It's Dr. Cunningham if you want to be formal. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Ericom Software.
And not only Dr. Cunningham, I've also heard you known as Dr. Zero Trust. Almost sounds like a Marvel villain there. Can you tell me more about the story behind that name?
Yeah, actually, it started as a joke. I was doing so much ZT work with so many different organizations that somebody said, man, you should have your doctorate in Zero Trust. And I just said, well, sure. So then I just took it as a moniker, and the next thing I know, it turned into a brand. So fun stuff kind of works out sometimes, but it was not an intentional thing, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, I love it. Well, since you are all things Zero Trust, I think I already know the answer to this, but do you think Zero Trust should be a key initiative for organizations this year? And assuming you're going to say yes, can you expand on some of the reasons why?
Well, I think it's really more of the inverse, where you've got so much proof that the other model, the perimeter-based model of security, is just categorically not lived up to what it was billed as. And if we continue to engage in the same practices, we shouldn't expect a different outcome. You know, people attribute that phrase to Einstein, even though he never actually said it. But if you do the same thing, things don't change, is really what it boils down to. So there are organizations that are getting into ZT that understand the veracity and the value proposition, and it's actually showing return for that effort.
I'm glad you said that about the Einstein quote, because I'm guilty of using it in the past as well. Do you know who did say it originally?
I think, if I read correctly, I think he said something similar to that, and it's just been attributed to him. And it's one of those things of, well, he kind of said it, but he never said exactly that.
Yeah, got you. And there will be many people listening around the world, in particular business leaders. And there's just the thought of implementing zero trust security is often incredibly tricky, cumbersome. And often when they do it, they find it's not as tricky as they first thought. So I'm curious, is that still the case? Is it getting easier now?
It's the technology to enable the strategy is much more digestible, and we have a bunch of providers that have done a pretty good job of lining up on how to enable the strategy. So it's just a good overall kind of perfect storm of the tech makes the strategy possible, and the strategy can be put in place. It's just a matter of whether or not an organization does that and sees the return on it. And I think the last numbers I saw were from a study that was published by IBM, said an organization that is engaged in some form of zero trust and does have a breach will save on average about $1.9 million.
Wow, that's incredible. And that's a big figure, especially at a time where many businesses are challenged with doing more with less because of the economic uncertainty. And that's probably something we're seeing on both sides of the pond right now. So as every tech project has to come through ROI, what value is it offering the business? I'm curious, do you have any stats you can share around zero trust? It is much more than just a nice to have or something that we should be aiming for. Is there any stats that you can share to bring that to life?
Yeah, I think the thing that's most interesting is that there was a group of red teamers, penetration testers that had a strategic implementation of zero trust kind of put in front of them. And after about what they typically would say was an operational sort of timeline, they all went and found another target. And I mean, that's the best metric you'll ever find, is that if your organization has got the strategy in place correctly, the adversary, the bad guy, will go somewhere else. That's the ultimate goal in this whole place, is to make it where the enemy, the hackers, the insider threats, etc., will find another target because you're the hard target. That to me was the one of, okay, we finally have something in place that will keep the continued sort of compromise cycle from being the thing that we're dealing with.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was reading that ChatGPT has achieved 100 million users in just 2 months, something that took even TikTok 9 months to achieve. Everyone's talking about it at the moment, but there are also a few cybersecurity concerns around it. There are filters put in place, but of course, with any AI chatbot, we all know how to overcome or blindside those chatbots. So I'm curious if there's any thoughts around that? And also, are there any other additional cybersecurity threats and vulnerability trends that you're seeing right now?
Well, I think ChatGPT is interesting because it to me is one of the clearer indicators of the marketing hype around AI, because it's not AI, it's machine learning, and it's powered with really good algorithms on the back end, and it's been tagged as AI. There's people, freaking out that this is the rise of the machines, and it's not. It's just a powerful chatbot. But I've used it for testing it out and sort of said, can it build me a phishing email? Can it write a couple simple scripts in Python, those types of things? And it's a really well done system. So I think that there are broader implications of that. The funny thing too, though, is even with new super cool technology like ChatGPT, the same stuff still causes the majority of compromises, bad passwords and phishing and those types of things. So it's good to know about the new stuff, and it's good to focus on the whiz bang cool factor, but in reality, it's still blocking and tackling that will wind up being the victor, the thing that enables victory on the far end.
And other big topics in the news right now, we've got the conflict in Ukraine to weather balloons being shot down over Montana. So with a seemingly increased global conflict, do you think we're going to see an increase in cyber warfare and state-sponsored attacks? Do you think we're naturally going to progress towards something like that? Does that concern you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of become a common point of conversation is that cyber is the bridge between espionage and kinetic warfare. So we already are seeing a lot of espionage operations, including a Chinese, balloon floating over the U.S., which I do think it's a little bit funny that we used $1 billion warplane to shoot down a balloon, but hey, it is what it is. And we're seeing an escalation of that. I think that there's going to be a continued growth of espionage and cyber operations related to Taiwan and the Yellow Sea. So that's kind of what I think is going to be applicable over the course of the next, say, 18 months. I think this Ukraine thing is coming to a tipping point. It's either Ukraine's going to win and Russia's going to kind of fall back on its heels, or Russia's going to really pour it on and Ukraine's going to be in a worse position.
And another topic I know is very close to your heart is cyber forensic and analytic operations. For anyone that's hearing about that phrase for the first time, can you just give me a brief overview of what it is and also the value that it's bringing to businesses now?
Well, the good thing is the technology that's evolved in the space has now made it where anybody can kind of be a forensic or analytic engineer. If you're able to look at a UI and you can kind of put together a contextual picture in your head, you can use the tech that's available to sort of run through what happened and where it happened and why it happened, which is the most important thing. So I think that that's a good thing. We need more people that are powered by technology so that we can solve some of this human capital crisis. I personally don't think that we have a human capital crisis. I think we have a a lack of using technology smartly to enable people to do the work. But we are starting to get some real benefit in that space of making it where people can operate at a higher level with tech.
And for any business leader listening anywhere in the world to our conversation today, what would you say their biggest focus should be on in enterprise security? And is there anything that stands out there?
I think really what they should do is they should look at the paradigm of what the bad guy needs to be continually successful, and then put controls in place to remove that capability. That's what we talk about all the time in ZT. But if you're not big on calling something zero trust, then don't worry about it. Call it whatever you want. But the reality of it is what you're trying to do is not focus on the perfect defense failed approach. You're trying to focus on the elimination of adversarial capabilities in a continuous fashion. And if you do that, you're putting yourself in a better place. I can live with a breach. I cannot live with a cataclysmic infection across my enterprise.
And I'm conscious we are talking about a lot of the threats, a lot of the concerns, and there's enough of that on our news feeds if we're doom scrolling down every day. Is there anything that makes you hopeful about the future and how attitudes to security are evolving?
I think we're starting to see that security is a point of conversation for the general public to some degree. It's not where I'd like it to be perfectly frank, but I think it's getting to be more a topic of conversation. And I also think that the next generation, the people that are starting to come into the workforce, are seeing that there's a win for them as a career in cybersecurity. I know for a fact that there's a lot of folks in my area that are starting to take up careers in cyber. So I think that that's going to start to affect the human capital thing that we do deal with. There's a lot of positives. We spend our time marketing the misery and the bad side of it, but there are a lot of positives in the space if you look for it.
And speaking of positives, I was reading just a few days ago that I think there's a 0% unemployment rate in the cybersecurity industry. And never been a better time for anyone to train and maybe pivot their career, have a complete career change and enter the world of cybersecurity, regardless of their background. And I know a lot of people get struck down with imposter syndrome and think, hey, I'm not technical enough, I'm not good enough for that industry. But of course, so many people have the transferable skills to work in a corporate environment, in a technical team, and the technical things can be taught. So what would you say to somebody, maybe it could be a mum entering the workplace for the first time, someone of a certain age, or equally someone coming straight out of education that want to enter the world of cybersecurity? Is there any tips or advice that you would offer those people?
Yeah, I think really the water's fine. Come on in is the advice I'd give them. So we need those people. If you've got the motivation, you have the desire, that's more important than the technical skills. We can teach you how to be technical enough to be dangerous. So I believe the last thing I read in the US was that there's a negative unemployment rate in cyber. Like you literally can't be unemployed if you are doing cyber things, which is a good space. So, get up, come on in, and let's figure out how we can use your skill set and your desire, and we'll help each other out.
And of course, you live and breathe this space. So and there is a real pressure on everyone to be in an almost state of continuous learning. And I'm curious, where do you self-educate? Where do you find out the latest trends? How do you keep up to speed with things? Is there anything you can share around that?
I think one of the best things is just to continually read through the publications and articles that are coming from organizations like NIST and CISA and those organizations that are publishing the advisories. And then the other thing that's really useful too, if you're trying to get on the technical side, is like use Hack the Box or Try Hack Me. They're free. They don't cost you anything, and you can get your hands dirty.
Wow. And what's next for you? I think the last time we spoke, you were writing a book. We were talking about the book. Any other books or anything we can be looking out for from you?
Yeah, actually, I'm writing another book. Not that anyone reads them, but I'm publishing another book on. This one is kind of a leadership book, but it's lessons in how not to lead, because I think we have enough books on how to do the leadership thing right and how to have the kind of higher level thinking about leadership, whatever. But no one's really written a book about, well, if you do these things wrong, this is what you should expect. And that's kind of my position, is that there's a lot of value in knowing what not to do, just like there's a lot of value in knowing what to do.
100%. And when's that due out? Are you still in the process of writing that at the moment?
Still writing it, but I plan on having it delivered by September. So moving along quickly.
Awesome. And kudos to you for doing that, because I think anyone that's wrote a book or going through the process of writing a book, they always say, I'm never going to do this again. But you keep coming back and keep doing it. How do you find the motivation?
It's just fun to know that you've done something that, in my mind, is somewhat contributing to the overall market and mission. And I think it's really interesting, and it's really rewarding too when one person will email you and say, hey, I read your book and I really got something out of it. That makes it worthwhile. You're not going to make money off of it, but it's a good thing to know that you're doing something that matters in some way.
100%, man. And for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about you, check out your previous writings, or even find out more about what you're doing at Ericom, what's the best starting point for everything?
Sure. If you're looking for Ericom, it's actually Ericom is the bigger, broader company. The product is zerotrustedge.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Chase Cunningham with a cartoon avatar. And then if you're on Twitter, it's at CYNJA Chase C. So lots of C's in there.
Fantastic. As always, I'll add all the links to that. Love chatting with you and getting a quick update on some of the trends that you're seeing out there, sharing your insights. I'd love to get you back on later in the year, maybe when your book's due out. We'll talk about that. But thanks as always, Chase.
Thank you so much.
Chase is just an incredibly cool guy, isn't he? And I really do urge anyone listening to check out the previous conversation we've had about his books, his origin story, etc. So I will include links to those previous conversations. I've got some real gold in there, so check those out. And if you've got a story you want to share, you've got a question you want to ask, simply email me now. techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes. And I also cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow, where we'll have another great guest waiting for us. I doubt it they'll be getting up at 4 a.m. to speak with me, I'll be honest with you. So a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.